rings, but I think
All right,
I
we're
feel
recording.
all right.
All right, welcome guys. Another year, another season, another missed playoff berth. Um, we're doing a year in review. We did one last year, I believe,
Hmm.
and we both said things. You know, I was right about a couple things, very wrong about a couple things. You know, certain things I really didn't want to be right about, and I was very right about them. So Jet season, I think it was like what we would call like a tale of two seasons, almost.
Hmm.
Like the first season was magic. The first half of this season for the Jets, magic, straight up magic, dude. Being
Yeah.
6-3 at a bye when they thought you were gonna win only 5 games throughout the whole year.
Yeah. Well, the defense really showed up this year. And I thought like, that was kind of expected. I mean, there's a lot of good investment on that defense. You have Quinn and Williams. Carl Lawson eventually started looking a little bit better towards the end of the season, but Jermaine Johnson, you have Gardner. I mean, Gardner looked like out of the bottle, like a perfect corner. Didn't have
Yeah,
any real problems as a corner coming in. So like the defense looked really good. The O line from like the summer started having injury issues going all the way back to get Becton having his injury concerns.
yeah.
Fant got injured. They were brought in Dwayne Brown. The second Dwayne Brown came in, Fant got injured. They
And
brought
then
in
Dwayne
Remmers at the
Brown went
start.
down.
Yeah, again, it was just a
Yeah,
cycle of offensive linemen. Eventually, Elijah Vera Tucker went down around. It was a midseason he went down. So it was the offensive line, especially with all the injuries they had to deal with, was like kind of the thing that you wanted to see because it was the thing that they put a lot of investment in and started to really like when things started going south, constantly throwing assets at it, trying to keep it upright. But eventually, like when you just have all those injuries, there's nothing you can do. There's nowhere you can go with it. Remmers, like, I know Remmers played in the most recent game. I think they signed him to the practice squad like months ago at a certain point.
yeah,
He was a
yeah,
guy I thought they should sign back in the summer when all this was going on down because he was like a solid right tackle guy who, like, if you weren't sure Fant was coming back, whatever was going on with Brown, he was a guy I thought they would bring in sooner, but he was a guy I had on the list of like, hey, they should probably sign this dude. And eventually they did just because you start running out of names on the list to call and offensive line got very dried up at a certain point during the season, and a lot of them because they got called up by the Jets.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a rough year. I know a lot of people are going to say we had great injury luck in some ways, but in some ways, I feel like offensive line is the worst place to lose. Your guys because they work as a unit and their teamwork is so important to that position, that group, that even one person kind of lost on an offensive line is huge. And to start off the year with both tackles down and and then your quarterback down. It was rough right from the start. It was rough, and the defense was still getting their sea legs because let's be real, nobody plays in the preseason anymore. So these guys are just getting used to it, and it was rough those first 3 games, like that Ravens game. If we were at full power, we would have blown the bricks off the Ravens because they played
Yeah,
a
well,
bad game.
the thing is, the Ravens always seem to do like very well those first couple of games because they have the consistency. They're
Yeah,
walking into a lot of early season games, and eventually they end up getting injury bugs, which happened this year, happened last year. It's happened quite a few years in a row where they start out looking really good because they have all the consistency in the world, but they've been having a lot of injuries themselves. Last year, Marcus Peters, he comes back, Humphrey, a lot of the defense ends up kind of like, guys get injured. This year was their offense. A lot of guys got injured for the Ravens.
yeah,
Whereas last year was the whole defense ended up getting injured. Their defense took a step forward when they traded for Roquan Smith from the Bears. That just solidified everything. Kind of recorrected where the Patrick Queen, trade went down. Patrick Queen draft pick went down, where he never really turned into the linebacker they wanted him to be. But Roquan Smith trading for him, like he wasn't even doing that much in Chicago. And the second they traded him, they knew exactly where they wanted to put him. And I saw him shut down a lot of the like high end running backs who catch passes out of the backfield, shut those guys down perfectly. Their run defense took a huge step forward. So
Yeah,
Ravens are just always that team that's constantly adjusting and
yeah.
has injuries and bounces back.
The Ravens are a good team, but I definitely feel like if we were, if we just were a little bit healthier, we would have beat them because I feel like they truly didn't play a good game. The first three games of the year were really rough. I'm not gonna lie. Just no Zach Wilson. And we wanted him so bad. Um, we were just a mess overall, and we looked like the same team we were last year. So I know, like at the first BC, like three games, is like just as a Jets fan, I was going. It was like PTSD. I was having flashbacks. You know, the
It
corpse
didn't
of
help that you're
Joe.
playing Flacco.
Yeah, exactly. The corpse of Joe Flacco, like barely being able to move, getting run over by dudes. Like 40-year-old Joe Flacco getting run over by dudes. It was rough. And then, like we were sloppy, we were fumbling the ball. Brees Hall hadn't gotten his NFL sea legs yet. He had a couple fumbles like early in the season, you know, and it was looking rough. It really was. And, around game four, which is the Pittsburgh game, you really saw what this team could become. You know, week one, we just got destroyed by a good organization. Week
Yeah.
two, we stole one from the Browns, who were not good.
Dude, the miscommunication issues. I mean, they just fired that D coordinator now, but for you to be in year three of a defensive coordinator and guys not knowing what they're lining up in, and at that time, everybody on that defense was there last year. It
Hmm.
wasn't any new guys on the back end, like other than maybe Emerson when he played, but you had Newsom who's in year two, Ward who just got a huge extension, who was actually the guy who was on the play where the Corey Davis catches the ball and walks in for the touchdown.
Hmm.
That was like the first starting this like first semblances of seeing Brees Hall being the player he can be.
Yeah. That's
Uh
the Garrett Wilson breakout game.
yes, Garrett Wilson too, man. By the way, that was one of the calls from last year when we did this.
Yeah, no,
Wide receiver, top 10. I was like, we were doing the draft, and I'm like, I can see you guys take a wide receiver. I was like, why would they take a wide receiver? They
I
took a
didn't
wide
think so.
receiver. I
And I didn't
called
like
that
him.
in January. That
You
was
you called that, and I didn't like Garrett Wilson. I really didn't. And you said he was your top guy, and I gotta applaud you for that. That's a
yeah.
big W for you.
Because you know what it is? It's what he does well translates well. It's the Justin
Hmm.
Jefferson, Amari Cooper, and I've started to learn doing evaluations. What does the guy do well, and what translates to the NFL quickest? And route running, and being quick, and being fast, and having good hands. All that stuff translates.
Hmm.
Not to say I was a hater. I did have questions on Drake London, but I wasn't as high on Drake London as I was on a guy like Wilson. I still thought Olave was still going to have a lot of good elements to the NFL. He ends up being a really good
Yeah,
player in
he's
the NFL
awesome.
as well. Honestly, that whole top five ended up looking really good at moments this season.
Yeah,
I just think
yeah,
Wilson ended up being the best one, and then maybe Olave ended up being the second best, depending on how you felt about it, because both of them ended up being very big, important players for both their teams.
yeah.
Very excited
But
for both
in
the Ohio
but in
State
three
guys.
years, in 3 years, we might be looking back and Traylon Burks is the best of all of them.
Yes,
He
if he
he's
gets a
an animal.
quarterback who's alive at that point, because like Tannehill looks
Yeah.
like he's starting to get a little busted now. They're moving on from their GM. They fired him mid-season. Now they're looking at trying to promote somebody, but they need to really fix what's going on there. I don't think Malik Willis is the dude. He didn't look good for his 3 or 4 games this season that he had to play in. So are they going to fix that? Are they going to move on from Tannehill? Are they going to bring in a guy like Derek Carr? The thing was, if they were going to bring in Derek Carr, they just fired Todd Downing, who's the offensive coordinator there, who actually has familiarity with Derek Carr. So I don't
Hmm.
know what their whole situation is going to be there. Not that I honestly think trading for Derek Carr when you have Ryan Tannehill is kind of like it's a lateral move.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
even if
There
he's better, how much better is he than Tannehill? Like you
I
got to
mean,
find
they're
the
still
guys who are
gonna
going to get.
throw a pick when you need it. Like when you need it least, they're gonna throw a pick. Like both those guys do that thing.
Yeah, I've
So
seen Derek Carr's had a lot of good fourth quarter comebacks, but again, you need like you still. I think they're just kind of more like it's the old mid thing. They're all kind of nowadays. You want to if you're gonna go with the mid guy, why are you gonna trade a pick to go one step more mid? Like you
yeah,
want a guy. You either want a guy who has the potential to be a top 5 to 10 guy, or again stick with the guy who brought you to the dance. So not that I think Tannehill's going to be the guy who takes him anywhere, but I don't think Derek Carr is going to move the needle on that. Same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo's of the world. It's basically like three ratings. You either have a shitty quarterback, a mid quarterback, and then a high level one. And the high level ones are the ones you really want. It's just, do you have access to that?
Yeah. So for this Jet season, let's go over a couple positives of the whole season. And I think the big positive of the first season of this season specifically is that Joe Douglas had a draft for the ages.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, the last two drafts have been good. Like,
Yeah,
he's not been a bad drafter, and their guys have really clicked. Garrett Wilson was a good pick. Jermaine Johnson ended up being a good player. Elijah Vera Tucker last year, Brees Hall. Again, a lot of these guys ended up being very good. Now, the problem with Brees Hall was, he's a running back, and he ended up getting the ACL tear. Now, that could happen to anybody. But again, that's kind of what you're kind of risking with that. I didn't think it was a bad pick. I might have had a preference on somebody else at that time who ended up also being a good player. But I
yeah,
also just think that it ends up being you know what? Round two pick on a running back's not that big of a deal, and sometimes like a very good value pick. You get that guy for 3 or 4 years. The problem
yeah.
with Brees Hall now tearing the ACL, you hope he comes back. How quickly does he come back, how healthy he's going to come back on that. But overall, they've been very good with their picks since Joe Douglas's first draft. And I think a lot of that first draft was drafting for a different, not knowing who your coordinators were going to be, not
Hmm.
knowing who your defense was going to be, not knowing what your scheme's going to be, but drafting to this scheme, they seem to be very good at that. Finding the guys who fit what they want to do, and I think that's because they have a good marriage. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, and yes, they. I know a lot of people have questions on LaFleur being the offensive coordinator. It was looking good at the beginning of the season. I think you even had some of your own questions at a certain point. But I also think it comes down to the quarterback there and who, at certain points, yeah, what's the problem? Is it Zach Wilson? Is it LaFleur? Is it the O line? Because the O line kept on getting injured. So, but Joe Douglas, I mean, once he figured out who he had a draft for, he's drafted perfectly for them.
And absolutely. And it's an awesome thing because almost everyone in this draft class played significant minutes and they played good. Jeremy Ruckert is the only guy that didn't really play this year, but Sauce played, Wilson played, Jermaine Johnson, he didn't start, but when he played, he was a run stuffer for us. He made that huge sack on Josh Allen in the Buffalo game. He's a good player and probably next year will be a starter. You know, Brees Hall is a superstar. We can already tell that. You
Yeah.
know, Michael Clemens. If you get a rotational defensive lineman in the fourth round, that's a big W.
Yeah.
You know, and then I don't know if Max Mitchell is a starter, but he's definitely a swing tackle. He's something.
And given how many injuries they've had this year on the offensive line, including Max Mitchell at a certain point,
Yeah,
knowing that you have a guy who you could stick in there who's gotten some reps here or there, having a guy now who's going to be in the second year of your system. They were going to like let him start. They had him play good snaps in the beginning of the year, and expecting him to be able to take over when guys went down really early on, which again, like I think some teams would have been a little bit afraid of that. But now you have a guy who's going to be another year in. And again, it's a very young team, and that's the good element to this, is that everybody there is still very young. You're getting to the end of Mekhi Becton's contract, so you're going to have to start making decisions on him. But everybody else in the two really good drafts that Joe Douglas had are still a couple years onto their deals. The only miss in those other two drafts that you can maybe point the finger at is the quarterback pick, and that's going to be the question going into this year. Are they going to bring in a guy? Are they going to try to keep Mike White? Because Mike White had a couple of moments where he looked pretty solid. But I don't know if Mike White moved a huge needle where you're going to throw big money at him. I think he might get Taylor Heineke money, which
yeah.
might be worth throwing at him. But
Well,
I
I'm
don't know if I look at him and go like, I need to go ahead and keep Mike White to like a stupid degree.
no, no. I want to talk about the quarterbacks later, but let's keep going with the strengths. So we got an awesome draft class. And I think the second big win of this year is the step up of the defense, but specifically the superstardom of Quinnen Williams.
Yes.
He is. an X factor. He's a game wrecker, and he's the reason. I think he's the true reason that this defense is good. You know, he's the reason everybody eats because
Yeah.
Quinnen requires a double team every play, and he's our building block. And the season's over. You better give him that money. You better back up the Brinks truck for him because someone's gonna do it.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know what do you think he's gonna get? 25 million, something like that?
Oh, D tackle's always a weird position with that. I don't know if he gets up to 25 just yet. He could if somebody really valued him to like Aaron Donald levels, that would be the 25 million marker. I don't know if it gets that high, but it's probably going to be low 20s. He's going to get something in that $20 million a year. At least the first 2 years fully, close to fully guaranteed, if not fully guaranteed. Uh, like you said, he's an interior presence. He creates havoc. He's been good the last few years. It's not like he's like it's only a 1 year show up. He's
Hmm.
just taking steps forward upon steps forward. And if you have that piece, especially when they've played like interior pressure is huge. Like it's sometimes a bigger game wrecker than edge pressure. You look at guys like again, Aaron Donald has been a huge guy like that. Jonathan Allen down in
Hmm.
Washington. There's only a
Yeah.
handful of those guys who create true like I'm gonna wreck your game if you don't pay attention to me kind of
Yeah.
levels on the pass rush. He's one of those guys. So I think that that's going to be a big part of keeping him around. Um,
I mean,
so
if you
I don't know. I
notice,
think he's mhm.
all of these perennial like teams that are always in the mix, they have a game wrecker at defensive tackle. The Chiefs have Chris Jones. The Rams have Aaron Donald. All these really great teams that are always in the mix, you got to have that guy right in the middle that is stuffing runs, getting tackles for losses and pushing that pocket so the quarterback has to roll out,
Yep. And
you
it's
know?
and it's great. And you look at the Steelers, right? The Steelers had Cam Hayward, still have him, but like they've built their whole defense around having those strong D tackles that can create an interior pressure. And they ended up developing more guys like Alualu and Tuitt, who eventually retired last year. So it's such an important element, especially when you're going up against these teams that run a lot of outside zone. uh, which is very similar to the offensive scheme that they're running, to get guys who can go ahead and blow up the guard spot
Hmm.
and get in there. You can kind of blow up some of these run games pretty quickly. They're going to have to double teams. They can't just pull the guard around.
Hmm.
When you have a guy that's as quick and as strong and great at the point of attack as Quinnen Williams, you have to account for that guy. So I agree. I think he's been such a great player for them. That defense, and you're right, it's probably a big reason why that defense took a step forward, along with having Sauce Gardner.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, honestly, all the corner spots were amazing this year. I know we talk about Sauce a lot, but DJ Reed he's a damn baller. He was playing his heart out. He's 5'9", but he did not play 5'9". Was guarding big receivers all year, not giving up anything. Slot corner, Michael Carter the second was killing it quietly. He's a good tackler. He's good in coverage. I'm so happy with the upgrade. And as a guy who was saying that we didn't need to upgrade corner, now that
Yeah,
I see what we have over what we had, it's night and day. What we had before was not a weakness. Now we have a strength,
yeah, and
you
it's
know?
different.
It's different.
And and when you're running now, granted, they run a lot of zone coverage because that's what they like to do. That's kind of
Hmm.
what Salah's background is. But if they ever want to expand on what they do, a lot of those guys are really good at multiple things. So and as they keep on, another year into that system, a lot of really good players, you open up the playbook, you start being able to toss things around and be able to like, all right, well, we have man coverage corners. We can throw a blitz in here at the most inopportune time for them. And that's been kind of that tree of coaching is they don't always blitz, but when they do, they kind of catch you really off guard.
Hmm.
They have such great, and again, having guys like that. Reader was a great pickup. Carter, I remember we had the year of the two Carters that year.
Yes,
And
yeah.
And now it's, again, I think the thing is trying to make sure that offense really starts clicking.
Yeah, because I mean, our defense, I don't know where we ended in the year in terms of rank, but I think we're one of the five best defenses in the league. You know,
Absolutely.
they're a problem to deal with. They're not the perfect defense. Ideally, I would like a little bit of more of turnover creation, but um, yeah,
And that
I'm
happens.
very happy. I'm so happy with what this defense is for us, and I think it's a real building block, and I think we're gonna have it for at least 3 years.
Yeah, but the thing is, they can't rely. The one downside is that defense becomes very unreliable as you have things like injuries and turnover and guys
Yeah.
becoming free agents. So it's why it's important that they keep Quinn Williams in the building. It's important why they keep on building upon what they have.
Hmm.
But having it, knowing that you have that top five defense this year that worked so well, and they were able to get a lot of really good performances out of guys. I think, gives them something to work off of, and it lets them know that, okay, we can start really, if there's anything that's missing on the offense, we can figure that out. And that's the thing they have to figure out is how to start scoring more points.
Yeah. So, I think those were the two big bright spots of the Jet season was that uh first of all, I can also say that the third big bright spot is Salah is not a clown. And I was worried that he might be a clown, but he's not. Thank God. Thank God Salah is not a clown. He really isn't. I think he handled everything this year really well. He did the ugly things that needed to be done. When Elijah Moore had his issues, he sat him down. He handled the two trade requests we have great. He handled the Zach Wilson problems, I think, as best as you could.
Yeah,
So Salah is good. I would say he's good with people, and I think that's the most important part of being a head coach.
yeah. I agree
So,
because I see teams that right now you would go, okay, like that's a good team. That's but or the offense is really good or the defense is really good, but their ability to manage players is or manage personalities becomes a struggle. And that I think is actually the hardest part of being a head coach is that exact thing, just trying to manage those personalities.
yeah, you kind of forget that the NFL is just a job, and it's the same thing as working in a restaurant where this guy is just the shift manager, and if the shift manager is not good at working with personalities, then they're not going to be a good manager in general, no matter how much they know the kitchen and they know the front of the house and know the back of the house. you know it's about dealing with the people, and I think he has great people skills.
No, and I think that was one of the things that was very noticeable when he came in. I thought when he came in, he seemed like a very personable guy. His interviews, like not to be sold on the interviews, but that's kind of the one thing you're getting the insight on. But his understanding of what was going to be important for his team, the things that he was going to rely on, all gas, no brakes, the mantra that he came in with,
Yeah.
marrying the run with the pass and the pass with the run, being able to articulate what he wanted to do with guys who didn't really ever play linebacker before, who he wanted to convert to linebacker, who were really previously safeties. And he communicated that very well. So he's a great communicator. He put a lot of guys in good positions. And again, I think he works really well with Joe Douglas. I think that marriage has come along really well. And I think part of what Salah does well is helped Joe Douglas do his job well.
Yeah, that's true. It does seem like they're in lockstep with each other, which is so rare for the Jets. I mean, because we come from Todd Bowles and McCagnon, where
Like,
they're making decisions without each other. This guy is making a whole decision without even letting Todd Bowles know what's happening.
yeah.
So it's a huge. I mean, it's a night and day upgrade from what we have. Um, and that's awesome. So, but there's a lot of uncertainty and dark parts of this year,
Yes.
and none bigger than finding out that Zach Wilson, which I saw from the moment he stepped on the field, is over his head. He's in over his head, and he probably needed a year or two to sit down and watch the game a little bit. And you see it now more than ever. Just everything's happening too fast for him.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is, and this is where you need somebody in that building who kind of shows him what you need to do. Like, they didn't have, when he came in, it was you're expected to start right away.
Hmm.
And they didn't have, I know they wanted Joe Flacco there to be the mentor, but he was like, oh, but I have a shot to maybe steal the Eagles job from Jalen Hurts. That never happened.
Hmm.
Um, which is then how we got traded over to the Jets. But with him not having somebody to kind of guide him the way, and it kind of also tells you like what you should look for in a quarterback. A lot of it's in between the ears. Nobody
Hmm.
comes into the league totally fixed, totally ready to go. It's the ability to adjust to the NFL. It's, with coaches, it's putting them in the right position. But does this guy have a skill set that allows him to do that? It was, people were debating him versus Justin Fields that year in the draft. And a lot of people were saying it's weird because a lot of things that people were saying about Justin Fields, I think you would say now about Zach Wilson, which
For
was,
sure.
it's actually an in between the ears
Yeah.
thing. It's
Slow
the
processing.
personality.
Does he love the game?
Yeah.
Like
He's
things
a
like that.
vegan. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, all those weird things. And it's like, okay, but like, first off, are those real things? Because you're hearing it from, Orlovsky, who's a great commentator, but like, what's the information you're really getting there? And is it somebody trying to put him down the board? You look at this year, Justin Fields, he might have maybe even taken a step back from throwing the ball, but that's also because the offensive line had its moments of taking a step back. He was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. They were
Yeah.
trying to give him a scheme that maybe didn't fit all of his strengths initially. And then he adapted and they adapted to what he did well, which is, dude, that guy can run the ball better than most quarterbacks in the NFL, maybe better than Lamar Jackson. Like that
Hmm.
guy looks like Cam Newton 2.0 in regards to that. So, this guy's making 60-yard run touchdowns. It's putting the guys around you that make you work. And the questions that I think a lot of people had with Zach Wilson was 1 year wonder, a little bit older. Yeah, I think a lot of people were infatuated with him because they heard Shanahan was infatuated with him and he ran an offense that was similar to what Shanahan ran in
Yeah.
college. And that was
You
kind of
know,
cool.
he would have been great with Shanahan, but we don't have Kyle Shanahan. We had a first year offensive coordinator. When Zach Wilson came in, the guy who was supposed to be his quarterback coach died. And we came into the year without a quarterback coach for a
Yeah.
rookie quarterback. And you're putting
Yeah.
it all on this new offensive coordinator who's dealing with so much. He's never been an offensive coordinator before. And and this is probably where you see the what you get with new head coaches, this greenness.
Yeah.
Part of Zach Wilson failing is the coaching staff. They put him in a position to fail.
Yeah.
He was put in a position where he was had to be the savior. And then when he wasn't the savior, he was throwing too many picks or he was too lazy with the ball. You let your rookie quarterback throw picks,
Not even that, but when
you
he
know?
was going there, he's starting out with when he got there, starting out with a lot weaker of an offensive line than what he's got now.
Terrible
So
offensive line. He had Corey Davis. This is the only thing he had. He had no tight ends. He had no running backs. It was a bad situation.
yeah.
It
So
was a very bad situation. And I think I don't know if even if everything was set up for him perfectly, I he would have worked out. But the situation that he was in, he and with his mindset, it was not going to work out. Because I see the kid. The kid has talent, man.
yeah,
A lot of it. He has arm strength that Patrick Mahomes like stays up thinking about. He can throw the ball, but
he he looks like if you could take Jimmy Garoppolo and try to tweak Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like if you could
mhm,
you put him in the Madden simulator and you go, okay, I want to up this, I want to up that, I want to up that, but then you take away the football IQ. Like
yes,
it's like a Super
yes,
Saiyan Jimmy Garoppolo, but minus all the ability of understanding what he's dealing with. And part of that is Jimmy Garoppolo. went to New England, sat behind Tom Brady, was being tutored in maybe one of the most complicated offenses, then went to the 49ers, was around Shanahan, who, like you said before, if he went to Shanahan, probably would work out a little bit better because you are being tutored by a guy who has a mastery of the game. Another guy, Mike McDaniel's, another guy who probably could have taken him along and said, yeah, no, I'm going to fix you. I'm going to tweak you up like this. And we're going to build everything to what works for you.
Exactly. And yeah, you know, that has to fall on Douglas and Sala.
Yeah.
Straight up. That's their fault. They should have known. I mean, and Douglas has done these things where he doesn't set up. He's learned, but I've seen in his tenure, he's not set up things properly. Even the year before with Sam Darnold, like he has never done a good job setting up the backup quarterback situation up until this year.
Oh, well, I don't think Douglas cared about Darnold. I think that was, listen, he knew that was the year that they were all tanking and it didn't matter. And he was going to get to pick his guy. I think he was setting the next guy up to at least have some semblance of a
Yeah.
success. He did not care about Darnold's success. So, and he knew that Gase was a bad coach. And there's a reason why they didn't fire Gase that whole year, which was, why would I fire the guy who's going to get me the number 1 or number 2 overall pick?
Hmm.
So I don't think that had like I don't think he cared about Darnold, but what I will say about that, I think the mistake was maybe it wasn't that Douglas made the mistake. I think it was I think they ended up being in the position of opportunity. They were
Hmm.
picking number 2 overall. The best players in that draft class were quarterbacks. Um, it was really hard to sit there and make an argument that they should go for somebody else in that year because that wasn't like a year where there was a lot of really strong talent outside of quarter. Like there was a lot of good players, but it wasn't like this is the guy. Like there wasn't like a Nick Bosa. There
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
like
no.
a Chase Young that
I
year.
hate this whole everyone's going back and be like, I hated Zach Wilson from the moment I saw. Shut up. Everyone loved the tape. The tape is amazing. Go back and look at the BYU tape. The guy's making throws out of this world. The
Yeah.
guy is running. He's not the quarterback that he's regressed. He's not the quarterback he was in college. He was dead accurate in college. I looked back because I thought I was crazy. I went and
Well,
looked back and saw the tape. The kid was accurate. The kid
so
could run. He
I
was
think
not
the
afraid to take a
mistake,
hit.
I think the mistake people made on the tape. And I'll try to do that quick because I know we're running out of time on the recording for the
Yeah, yeah.
Zoom.
Once we drop it,
Yeah,
I'll have you back in.
but the issue I think with that is people didn't take into account that that was a COVID year. They were only
Hmm.
playing a very weak. They were playing a much weaker schedule. I think one of the hardest teams they played against, I think, was Houston. So like maybe one top 100 talent on defense that he played against, or two top 100 talents on defense that he played against.
Hmm.
So it's what you are rating when you're watching the tape. You know, he's throwing at Dax Milne. He's getting all the time in the world to throw. He is running this outside zone offense, which was really good. And it was kind of nice getting to see him run a lot of concepts he would do in the NFL. But I think people overrated some of the things and they didn't take into account the level of competition, which was one of the things that I had worries about. Also, he liked to run the ball a lot, and I always had a worry that he was going to get injured in the NFL. And that was something I said back then was if he keeps running that way, he's going to get injured. And he's been injured a
Surprise,
lot the last
surprise.
2
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, so let's jump back up and I'll add you to the new one again.
awesome.